Look, I know we could all talk about our favourite video games until the cows came home. But what about the video game systems that we played them on? Well, coming up are my top 5 video game systems of all time. Hello friends and welcome back to Generation Pixel, and if you're new to the channel, well, thank you for pressing that play button and joining us for my top 5 video game systems of all time. Now, the only fair way I decided to do it, well, it was quite simple, chronologically. So we're going to start right at the beginning of time, or beginning of my gaming time anyway, almost, and show you the first machine. So coming in at number 5, the Sinclair ZX Spectrum. Now, this little 8-bit microcomputer is almost 40 years old now, and well, I had one since I was 10 years old, so you do the math and work out how old I am. But anyway, besides the point, I don't want to digress too much, because this machine here is what brought gaming or video gaming into my own home right at the beginning of my gaming history. Well, not completely my gaming history, because obviously there were arcade machines, and of course a cousin that had an Atari 2600, but for me it was the Sinclair ZX Spectrum. Now, the ZX Spectrum, as I've said, is an 8-bit microcomputer, and it pretty much single-handedly saved the UK from the video game crash of 1983, because over in North America, as some of you may have experienced and some of you may just know about, well, there was a sort of influx of, let's call it shovelware, on the Atari 2600, and it done no end of damage to the video game industry. Over in the UK, however, and especially in the west of Scotland where I grew up, we had this wonderful little machine, and it provided all the video game fun we needed for, well, over the next decade. So there we go, number 5, the Sinclair ZX Spectrum, probably the little micro that saved the video game industry in the UK. So coming in at number 4 on this chronological top 5 video game systems list, we have the Sega Mega Drive, or of course, if you're over the pond, it's the Sega Genesis. Despite the name, they're both the same machine, so for the duration of this I'll probably just call it the Mega Drive, because that's what it was called over here. Anyway, the reason I picked this particular console and not the other consoles that were out at the time, or even just a bit before, was for me, this machine was the first one to bring the arcade experience into the home. Now, that was something that we'd all craved for from the very early 80s, was to be able to play our favourite arcade machines, but at home without having to fire coin after coin into the slots. And this is a machine for me that brought the arcade experience home first. Now, yes, of course I have played earlier machines, but they were nowhere close to their arcade counterparts, and this one, well, it knocked my socks off. And in particular, it was a certain blue blurb by the name of Sonic the Hedgehog, and once I saw that little guy dash across a CRT, well, I had no option but to run out and grab one of these Mega Drives. And that is why, at number 4, we have the Sega Mega Drive.
My favourite squeezes. You wanna play an impressive game? Squeeze a ton of semolina in a vacuum bag. Even more impressive for a troublemaker is squeezing whoopee cushions in an elevator. Best squeeze of all, and we're doing you a favour. We squeeze into a Mega Drive 3 games from Sega. If the thought of DOS makes your eyelids flicker, you get the whole lot for 150 nicker.
So coming in at number 3 on this chronological top 5 of video game systems, for me anyway, we have the Sony PlayStation. Now, this little grey box was a thing of wonders. Before I had the Sony PlayStation, I had the Sega Mega Drive, but more so I was gaming on PC. I was heading towards a life of being in the PC master race until Sony released this wonderful little thing, and not only that, the game Resident Evil. After seeing that game and seeing near PC quality gaming on a console, well, there was no looking back for me, and that is why at number 3 we have the Sony PlayStation.
For years I've lived a double life. In the day I do my job. I ride the bus, roll up my sleeves with the hoi polloi. But at night, I live a life of exhilaration.
Of missed heartbeats and adrenaline.
And, if the truth be known,
a life of dubious virtue.
I won't deny I've been engaged in violence, even indulged in it.
I've assailed adversaries, and not merely in self-defence.
I've exhibited disregard for life,
limb,
and property.
And savoured every moment.
You may not think it to look at me,
but I have commanded armies
and conquered worlds.
And though in achieving these things,
I have set morality aside,
I have no regrets.
For though I've led a double life, at least I can say
I've lived.
Coming in at number 2 on this chronological top 5 of video game systems, we have none other than the Nintendo GameCube. Now this wonderful little system, the reason we all bought it and lusted after it back in the day, well, it was because Nintendo was growing up. Or so we thought, because let's face it, Nintendo never do what you expect them to do and always go their own way in the end. But to start with, yes, if you wanted to play games like Resident Evil 4, this is where you had to start. And not only that, 4 controller ports in the front meant it was a great multiplayer system that could be carried quite easily with one hand to your friend of choice. And that is why the Nintendo GameCube is number 2 on my chronological top 5 video game systems. So here we are at the very end, the number 1 spot, the heavyweight if you will, and because let's face it, when it comes to my particular chronological top 5 of video game systems, the number 1 is a heavyweight indeed, and that's because it's none other than the Sony PlayStation 3 first edition backwards compatible model. That's correct, this boy here can play games from PlayStation, PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3, meaning you can play games from Final Fantasy 7 all the way to The Last of Us. Now that's quite mind-blowing when you think about it, but this machine here, without a doubt, is my number 1 gaming machine just because of how versatile it is and how many different generations you can play on it. Now of course you can play lots of games emulated, but this isn't emulated. Well, it is emulated, but it's official emulation. So at number 1, without a doubt, we have the Sony PlayStation 3 60GB backwards compatible, my number 1 gaming system of all time. So there you go my friends, that's my top 5 video game systems, chronologically of course, from, well, back in 1982 all the way to, well, present days, because as you can see, I still got them and I still love them. Now what about yourself? Do you want to talk about any of the systems that you've seen today? Did you go a different path perhaps? Well, you can put that down in the comments, because I love nothing more than the interaction between you and me, and it's what keeps this channel going. Of course, if you've enjoyed this video, why don't you throw me a thumbs up, because 1, it does good for the channel, and 2, well, it makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside. So thank you very much for watching again, and until next time, cheerio!